What's going on, people? My name is Batman, and about 2 weeks ago, Bungie released the reveal trailer for The Dark Below, and it showed off some gameplay that took place in the Seraphim Vault and the Hypogeum, two areas which we found already built on the disc. So, this kind of confirms what we already knew, which is that the locked content was in fact meant for the DLC, and I think Bungie knew this revelation might raise even more eyebrows than were already being raised, so they thought it would be a good idea to defend why the content was already on the disc in the first place. Their explanation comes from the president of Bungie, Harold Ryan. He says, and I quote, "There's a bunch of shared world content we've shipped on the disc specifically to limit download sizes for people. Both inside the US and all over the world. How much you download on your local home internet connection can be a problem, and even how much storage space it takes up on your console." Now, I think this explanation is entirely unsatisfactory. And in fact, I think part of the reason they might have been doing it is a lot of people were saying they were going to look at the download size of the DLC to judge how much content was already on the disc. And I think Bungie might have been sort of shielding themselves in advance because they know that that download is going to be very small because all the content is already on the disc. But regardless, you know, what about the millions of people, including myself, who digitally downloaded the game in the first place? Because we were able to glitch into those areas too. It's in the game files themselves. Doesn't that mean we face significantly longer download times at launch and increased storage usage on our consoles for content we didn't even have access to? And assuming we pre-ordered, wouldn't we want a faster download on launch night when we were trying to play at midnight as opposed to a faster download for the first DLC? I think what they're really trying to say is that they finished the game ahead of schedule a few months before its plan launched and started working on the DLC, and then shipped what they had already accomplished for the DLC with the actual game. Now, that explanation might actually be satisfactory if it wasn't for the fact that the vast majority of people's primary complaint with this game is that it doesn't have enough content. The game feels unfinished. If they finished early, they should have kept working on the game instead of just trying to get ahead of schedule with DLC. That's where I really think all the anger is coming about the on-disc locked content, is that the game itself felt lacking in the first place. If the game itself hadn't felt lacking, they might not have had this problem at all. That's where people's anger is really coming from. And furthermore, and more troubling, is that this doesn't explain what happened with the reef and that forest area, both of which we saw in trailers over a year ago. Were they an entire year ahead of schedule? Did they finish this game a year ago and start working on the DLC? If the reef or that forest area make it into DLC, that was still content cut from the original game to be resold for extra profit. I don't see any way around that at this point. And I would also remind you of an argument I made in past videos, which is that when a developer is dedicating their time to working on DLC before the game has launched, when they could be dedicating that time towards working on the actual game, that is, in my eyes, not very different from simply taking that developer's finished work and locking it out of the original game to sell as DLC. Faster download speeds for the DLC does not justify nor answer any of our questions about what happened with this game in the final year of its development, why we didn't receive what was promised. Now, something else to consider is that they've announced they're already working on Destiny 2. That game will come out in 2016, I'm sure. Maybe the plan was to take content out of the main game to fill the DLCs, so that instead of having to dedicate even more time to those DLC packs, they could get a head start on Destiny 2, which we know they're already building. Now, another more sinister possibility is that they wanted to scale back the content in Destiny in order to make sure you weren't still playing it heavily in November, so that you would have incentive to buy Advanced Warfare. Now, this is something I'm going to explore a little more in Advanced Warfare Destiny comparison video I'm working on. I know it sounds like a tinfoil hat type of explanation, but honestly, if you read up on human institutions in general, whether it's major companies or government bureaucracies, whether it's today or centuries ago, you know the tinfoil hat stuff happens all the time. And the other argument I'm going to make in that video is that maybe that's why Advanced Warfare only has a souped up combat training as its cooperative mode instead of a full-fledged Extinction Zombies type of game mode, because they want you getting back on Destiny. You know, a couple days ago I released that video in support of COD modding. And something people kept bringing up that I hadn't considered actually is that they can't have modding, not only because they want to sell you the DLC, but also because they want to sell you the next game. Is it possible developers are only giving us the bare minimum of content in a game so that we won't play it for too long, so that there's incentive to buy the next game? That seems absolutely plausible with Destiny. And this 10-year plan everyone keeps talking about when defending Destiny. They say Destiny has a 10-year plan, just wait for it to evolve. It has to start out small, it's a universe that will grow over the next 10 years. What do you people think a 10-year plan is? Every game has a 10-year plan. Halo has had a 15-year plan. Mass Effect is working on its 4th game. That series will have a 10-year plan. Dragon Age has a 10-year plan. Borderlands will probably end up having a 10-year plan. The Elder Scrolls has a 10-year plan. All that means is that they're going to try and sell you games and DLC revolving around a single universe for the next 10 years. That's what every game does, or at least that's what every game tries to do. It's what they want to do. It's nothing unique or restricted to Destiny. However, what it might explain is Destiny's clear bias towards a younger audience with the T rating and the general in-game simplicity that I've discussed in depth in past videos. If they have a 10-year plan, they don't want to hook a bunch of adults because adults don't have as much time to play as younger audiences. Adults have access to many other different forms of entertainment. They can spend their weekends going out drinking or what have you, whereas younger audiences either stay home or go to a friend's house, but in both cases usually end up playing video games. Older audiences are less inclined to spend their own money, whereas younger audiences don't give a fuck because they're spending their parents' money. And older audiences naturally gravitate towards more complex games like StarCraft or PlanetSide 2 as opposed to the general simplicity of COD or Destiny. But if they've already spent a bunch of time in the universe, if there's a heavy amount of name recognition there, they'll still buy the sequel or whatnot. Maybe the reason they oversimplified the story missions, the story itself, the reason they took out the in-game economy, was so that they would have a higher chance of hooking a bunch of smaller, younger children so that they could sell them this game, future games, future DLC for the next 10 years. Better to have a bunch of 10-year-olds hooked on the first game than a bunch of 20-year-olds who might get bored of the game by the time they're 30. And lastly, something else I wanted to talk about real quick. People keep saying the crypt art could have been what the developer was talking about when he said there was gambling. I think that is a stretch and such a technicality. I mean, yes, technically you are rolling for an item when you use the Cryptarch, but there's no risk of loss. You're guaranteed an item. And also, have you ever heard anyone refer to the Cryptarch as gambling outside of the comment section of that one video where I bring it up? I just had to get that off my chest. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's fucking me or from what direction I'm being fucked, but I know there is some fuckery taking place. The best we can do is keep talking about it. I encourage you to share your thoughts on these matters in the comments. And also, please rate. This is Batman, signing out.